Let's get started. Hello and welcome to the Sustainability and Protective Clothing webinar. This webinar is brought to you by TenCate Protective Fabrics. We are the largest inherently flame-resistant fabric manufacturer globally and leaders in the industrial safety, emergency response, and military PPE industries. My name is Tim Thorne. I've worked at TenCate for 10 years, and in those 10 years, I've worked as an R&D chemist specializing in dyeing and finishing of textiles and wet processing. I've also worked as an R&D engineer developing FR fabrics for military and law enforcement use. And the last 4 years, I have been the acting international business development manager for Asia Pacific, including Australia, New Zealand, and the Middle East. Before we get started, I want to say something about the presentation. So in researching on the sustainability of workwear, there's really very little reliable research out there, and there's not enough research that's public to that's not enough research and that's public to the people out there available on this topic. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. So today in this webinar, I'll cover all of the overall impact of textile and clothing industry. I'll also break down the impact of the clothing process by process and how that impacts the environment. We'll also look at some of the various raw materials or fibers that make up garments and their impact. And within that, we'll also cover differences between cotton and organic cotton, which is one of the most misunderstood points in textiles. And we'll also look at synthetic, man-made, and natural and semi-natural fibers and the pros and cons of each. I'll also mention the environmental impact of FR treatment and the research that we found on that. And finally, we'll look at the best ways to reduce the environmental impact of a garment and what our initiatives are to be more eco-friendly and how we can help and our suppliers and customers be more eco-friendly. When we look at the entire textile and clothing industry, from the clothing you're wearing now and on the weekends to the PPE you wear on the job, we can see there's a pretty significant footprint that we make. The textile and clothing industry is one of the largest polluting industries globally. You can imagine all of the clothing every human being wears day to day adds up to a significant amount of pollution and waste. About 10% of global greenhouse emissions comes from textiles and clothing, according to the UN. About 17 to 20% of industrial water pollution is related to textile or fabric processing. This is due to the huge amount of water needed for dyeing and finishing, and also the irrigation used for natural fibers, particularly that of cotton. And speaking of cotton, 24% of pesticides are used for cotton grown for textiles. According to the World Bank study published in 2016 on apparel and footwear, clothing sales has steadily increased since 2000. 2 times more clothing is being sold per year than in 2000. Clothing utilization at the same time has steadily declined. So in general, this means that people are buying more garments as garments become cheaper. However, they are wearing these garments much less often, and which is creating a bigger footprint on the environment. So we can break down the environmental impacts in 3 different segments. One is the raw material or the fiber used in creating fabrics and clothing. The second is the fiber to garment segment, which includes several different processes in the phase from fiber to garment. And then finally, the total garment life cycle. So this includes the impact all the way to the end of the life of the garment. So what exactly are we talking about when it comes to the environmental impact? Well, there are several ways that the environment is affected, not just one, and several ways to measure them. In general, we're looking at CO2 emissions, water usage, toxicity like pesticides, land usage, energy usage, and pollution to include micro pollution like small plastic particles. One of the best meta studies, meaning a study that pulls all the research and data that exists today into one publication, is called the Mistra Future Fashion Report that was done in 2019. So from that study is this pie chart here, and they've broken down the overall climate impact of each segment of the garment life cycle. So as you can see, the fiber makes up 16% of the environmental impact. The processes involved from fiber to garment is over half at 55% of the environmental impact. Consumer transport is 22% of that. And then to a smaller extent, distribution, laundry, and disposal is contributes to the overall environmental impact. So starting with raw materials, the fiber and various types that make up that 16%, we can categorize these fibers based on where they come from. So the synthetic fibers, those that are man-made, come from crude oil. And then we have natural fibers or plant fibers, and these are produced from plants like cotton, for example. And then within the natural fiber group, we also include regenerated fibers, which are man-made fibers that are regenerated from natural plant sources, for example, wood pulp or bamboo. And then finally, a smaller category is the last major group of fibers that are from animal hairs like wool and cashmere. By far, one of the most utilized raw materials and fibers are those that are natural sourced and synthetic fibers. So over the last 20 years, synthetic fibers has become one of the most predominantly used raw materials for textiles, and for good reason, as we will talk about. Both synthetic and natural fibers have the similar amounts of environmental impact, but they impact in different ways, particularly at different parts of the process. Cotton has more impact from water usage, land usage, and chemical usage, chemicals such as pesticides primarily. And synthetic fabrics use higher amounts of energy and emission in the polymer synthesis and extrusion phase. Synthetic materials are also not biodegradable, meaning that they also contribute to pollution. But synthetic fibers tend to be more durable and make garments last longer. So in the graph to the right, you can see the eco cost of fabrics manufactured out of cotton, acrylic, nylon, polyester, PET, and elastane, which is spandex. You can see by the bars, the costs are very similar, roughly 3 to 5 euros per kilogram, but they come from different parts of the process shown by the color segments per bar. For example, nylon contributes most costs from base material manufacturing, like we talked about the emissions and synthesis, polymer synthesis and extrusion phase of synthetic fibers. However, cotton has the highest in dyeing and finishing phase because of the extra wet processing involved in producing cotton textiles. So generally you can see that both of these types of fibers, natural and synthetic, have similar eco costs. However, they come from different parts of the process. One of the most misunderstandings in the textile industry is a sustainability difference between cotton and organic cotton. Actually, they're very similar, and there are other factors that have much greater impact than whether one is an organic produced cotton or one is conventional cotton. The primary difference is that organic does not use pesticides, whereas traditional cotton textiles do. So that's better for the environment. But also on average, organic cotton uses slightly less water than conventional cotton. Both fabric manufacturing processes typically are about the same for organic and conventional cotton. But interestingly enough, the Mistra meta study found that there is a much greater variation within regions and sites than the small difference between organic produced and conventional cotton. This means that it's more effective to carefully choose which sustainable supplier you are using rather than choosing organic versus cotton. In the graph to the right, you can see the comparison of water usage and energy usage between two suppliers, supplier X and supplier Y. And you can see the dramatic difference there is between the environmental impact. So this just emphasizes the importance of choosing a more sustainable supplier versus choosing organic cotton versus cotton. Like I mentioned earlier in the fiber and raw materials section, a segment of fibers are called man-made natural fibers or regenerated natural fibers. These utilize plant sources such as wood pulp and dissolve and are extruded into fiber. Environmental impact can vary a lot depending on the manufacturing and type of the fiber. This means that they can be some of the best and some of the worst fibers from a sustainability perspective. One of the leading companies in specializing in regenerated cellulosic fibers is Lenzing AG. They produce fibers like Lenzing FR, Modal, and TenCate fibers, for example. In the Mistra study, it was found that TenCate fibers, which is one of the regenerated cellulosic fibers by Lenzing, is one of the top sustainable fibers available today. In the schematic to the right, you can see the process to produce TenCate fibers where solvents and water usage are captured and recycled back into the process, greatly reducing the environmental impact. So you can see here the reuse and capturing of the water and solvents. Although there's very limited studies of FR textile treatments and their environmental effects, we can see here in one study done on FR treated curtains, it is estimated roughly 12% of carbon emissions and are due to the FR treatments. We can see that the FR treatments will add a significant impact on the environment. But there's just simply not enough studies available for other types of chemical treatments to accurately assess the FR treatment environmental impact. When we look at fabric manufacturing, we can see that the type of yarn and weaving we use also has an impact. If you look at the right, the top graph shows a much finer yarn used in a fabric. For example, like your very nice dress shirt with very fine, soft yarn, which has a cost of 5 to 7 euros per kilogram, versus a larger yarn, for example, yarns used in your jeans, for example, have a lower environmental cost of 3 to 5 euros per kilogram. This means that we can use larger yarns and more efficient weaving to reduce the eco cost of woven textiles. And in the wet processing phase, I do want to mention there are new technologies to reduce water and energy consumption. However, these technologies are typically meant for single fiber fabrics and are not applicable to protective clothing blends yet. So how can we reduce the environmental impact of clothing and textiles? In a study called A Carbon Footprint of UK Clothing and Opportunities for Savings, this study evaluated various common ways to reduce the amount of carbon dioxide emissions per year in garment manufacturing. So let's look at this graph here. The initial dark blue bar graph here is the current carbon dioxide emissions for a garment. And in these steps downward to the other dark blue bar graph, these steps show the environmental savings or carbon dioxide reduction of each process. For example, eco-efficiency across the supply chain has a big impact on reducing the carbon dioxide emissions. But one of the interesting things about this study is that the design for durability here, the largest impact, it has the largest impact on carbon dioxide per year. So the design for more durable textiles and clothing increases the life cycle of the garment and is the greatest impact factor in reducing carbon dioxide emissions. Further, in a study on climate impact of a garment, we can see the overall climate impact is less if the garment is used twice as long. So look at this bar graph here. So here's the climate impact with the carbon dioxide emissions. And so this garment has the average garment use is 30 uses. So you can see that the carbon dioxide emissions of the total garment life cycle is very high. Whereas if we can extend the life of the garment to 60 uses, it reduces it by over half. So actually it's 52% decreased in environmental impact over the life cycle of the garment. So you can see that probably the easiest and best way to reduce your environmental impact on each garment is by making it last longer. So let's talk about some of our products and initiatives and how we're creating a more sustainable future through longer lasting products and more eco-friendly materials that we're using today in our fabrics. So, like I said, the most effective way to reduce environmental impact is by increasing the life of the garment through more durable materials and garment design. So this is key to a lot of the products we're developing today. So to improve the durability of protective garments, we have introduced our TenCate Plus fabric in our ripstop configuration to improve the dynamic tear resistance. So this makes TenCate Plus more durable against snag tears and sudden tear propagation, providing a longer lasting material for garments. We're also introducing the TenCate Plus Grid Strong fabric for wildlands firefighting. At a heavier weight of 245 grams per square meter for wildlands use and in a twill ripstop construction, the tear resistance is greatly enhanced to provide a more durable material for wildlands firefighting. The TenCate Plus Grid Strong also comes with covered filament, static resistant fiber, which makes for the best durable static resistance you can get today, and will have no visible any static grid in the light colors for a smoother appearance. Also, I want to mention about our TrueColor technology, which many of you know of. So with our introduction of our TrueColor technology around 7 years ago, we were able to use over 50 years of our dyeing and finishing expertise and our fiber technology to bring you superior color fastness on dark colors. So TrueColor technology improves the color durability of dark colors, increasing the wear life of garments over extended number of washes, which can improve the life cycle of garments. We're also in the works of bringing you the same true color technology for the emergency response market. Creating a new outer shell for firefighting structural gear will increase the color durability of expensive structural gear, allowing for garments to last longer over more washes. To meet the demand for environmentally friendly workwear, TenCate has developed a line of comfortable and sustainable fabrics with a much lower environmental impact. So one of these is our TenCate Eco Green. These fabrics are made of 100% green fibers with a blend of 35% TenCate, which is lyocell from sustainable source wood. We talked about that earlier. And then 65% is from mechanically recycled polyester from PET bottles. Using TenCate fiber in our new TenCate Eco Green fabrics reduces our water usage in the fiber manufacturing stage by 95% versus conventional cotton fiber. And then using 65% recycled polyester reduces the consumption of energy by 45%, the water consumption by nearly 20%, and greenhouse gas emissions by over 30% in comparison to virgin polyester fiber. And then finally, we are developing our FR treated fabrics for more sustainable fiber materials with our TenCate Eco Green line. And also we'll be integrating the same type of technology into our TenCate Plus Eco Green line, which we're currently developing. So in summary, textile and clothing are one of the highest polluting industries. Fiber to garment processing makes up 55% of the environmental impact. This is because of the many processes involved and the water and energy consumption with those processes. Natural and synthetic fibers have similar impacts. So natural is not necessarily better than synthetic fibers when it comes to being eco-friendly, but the environmental impact comes from different parts of the process. So natural fibers come from the land and irrigation process and the water usage and dyeing and finishing, whereas synthetic fibers, the energy consumption is from the extrusion and polymer synthesis phase. And then organic cotton is not necessarily more sustainable than conventional cotton. As we saw, your different suppliers that you use is more important. So it's more important to selectively choose a more sustainable supplier that's more effective than going with something that's marketed or advertised as organic cotton. There's really a small difference between organic cotton and conventional cotton. And also, we've learned that man-made natural fibers like TenCate are some of the most sustainable fibers and can be used in protective fabrics. The best way to reduce environmental impact is by improving the life cycle of the garment. This is the key message from all of the studies out there, is saying that if you can extend the life of the garment, you can reduce the overall impact of that garment. And that is the best way to do your part. And TenCate is creating more durable and sustainably sourced materials to the market to reduce these environmental impacts. So I want to say thank you for joining in, and I hope you guys learned something from this webinar. Here are the sources that I used in the research that we conducted. I really encourage you guys to look into this further, especially the Vistra Future Fashion Report has a great summary of all of these key topics. And please feel free to reach out to us, ask any questions or any comments you have to apacsales@tencatefabrics.com. We'll be happy to answer any questions you have. So thank you again, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next webinar. Bye.